Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a figure who, honestly, sounds like he walked straight out of an action movie. Otto Skorzeny.
The man the Allies called the most dangerous man in Europe.
And Hitler's favorite commando. It's a reputation that was built almost overnight, wasn't it? After one single, incredibly audacious mission.
That's right, the 1943 rescue of Benito Mussolini. It's an operation that even today holds up as this remarkable feat.
It really is the stuff of legend. You've got Mussolini under arrest, held in this remote hotel, the Campo Imperatore, high up in the mountains. And this mission, it's still compared to things like, the SAS storming the Iran embassy or Israel's raid on Entebbe.
Even Winston Churchill had to admit it was one of great daring.
Yeah.
And Hitler told Skorzeny personally that he had, quote, performed a military feat which will become part of history. And that instant fame, that's what created the Skorzeny legend.
But that's what our deep dive is about today, right? Because our sources show this legend was a mix of, undeniable daring, but also state-sponsored propaganda and, frankly, relentless self-promotion.
Exactly. Our mission is to try and separate the real commando from the constructed myth.
So let's start with the man himself. I mean, what kind of person becomes this sort of legend?
Well, he was born in Vienna in 1908, so he's steeped in that sort of ultra-nationalist culture. But the detail I always find most telling is his time in the dueling fraternities.
The Schlagende Verbindungen.
Yes, that's where he got those famous scars on his cheek, the Schmiss. He said later that learning to take the pain from a saber taught him not to be afraid of anything.
So he's already building this image of theatrical toughness from a young age. But he was an engineer by trade. He actually had trouble getting into the military at first, didn't he?
He did. He tried to volunteer for the Luftwaffe, but they rejected him. Said he was too old. He was 31, and at the 6'4", just too tall to be aircrew.
So he ends up in the Waffen-SS instead.
As a technical officer initially. It's funny to think that the man who became Hitler's go-to commando was basically a military reject at first.
Which brings us to Operation Oak Unternehmen Eiffel. This is July 1943. Mussolini's been arrested, and the Germans are desperate to get him out before Italy switches sides.
And finding him was the real challenge. The Italians kept moving him. Skorzeny was definitely key in the reconnaissance that finally pinned him down at the Gran Sasso Hotel.
Right, but this is where the myth really takes hold. The story is that Skorzeny himself came up with this crazy plan to land gliders right next to the hotel.
That is the SS propaganda version, yes. But our sources paint a very different picture. The actual operation was devised by a Major Harold Moores, a Luftwaffe paratrooper commander.
A Luftwaffe commander.
Yes, and it was approved by General Kurt Student. In fact, Moores later claimed Skorzeny was, and I'm quoting here, a mere passenger on the mission.
Just a passenger. So how did the SS manage to completely steal the credit from the Luftwaffe, who provided the actual troops?
It was a mix of SS political power and, a crucial mistake in the plan. The gliders weren't supposed to land in the order they did, but Skorzeny's glider, by sheer chance, landed first.
And he didn't waste the opportunity.
Not for a second. He stormed the lodge, no shots were even fired, and immediately delivered that perfect theatrical line. Deuce, the Fuhrer has given me orders to free you.
That's the moment. But the real proof of his obsession with his image is what came next, with the getaway plane.
Oh, the Fizzler Storch. Absolutely. This was pure, calculated branding. First, he insisted on bringing 2 war correspondents and photographers, which meant they had to leave combat troops behind.
Just to get the pictures.
Just to get the pictures. And then he risks the entire mission by cramming his own 6'4" frame into that tiny little plane designated just for Mussolini.
That plane barely had enough room to take off from that plateau as it was. With his weight added, it was incredibly risky.
But he had to be in the photo. The entire operation was hijacked for the cameras. The SS got their hero, Skorzeny got a promotion, and the world got a legend, a PR victory.
And once he had that celebrity status, it seems like they started deploying him as an asset. Which brings us to Operation Panzerfaust in Hungary a year later in '44.
A critical mission. They had to stop the regent, Admiral Horthy, from making a deal with the Soviets. Skorzeny's role was to kidnap Horthy's son.
The story about him being rolled up in a carpet is famous.
It is. But if you read Skorzeny's own account, he actually downplays his role here compared to Gran Sasso. This was a much larger coup involving a police general and many others. It wasn't a one-man show.
Which is very different from his last and most infamous mission, Operation Grief during a Battle of the Bulge.
Right. And if Gran Sasso was a calculated PR risk that paid off, Grief. Grief feels more like ambition getting ahead of actual competence.
So let's unpack that. Hitler gives him command of the 150th SS Panzer Brigade. The plan is wild. Send men behind Allied lines in American uniforms to cause total chaos.
And this is where his lack of proper officer training really starts to show. Other Special Forces officers were very critical. One said he simply wasn't officer material, and another accused him of lacking basic tactical thinking.
Because the execution was just a mess, wasn't it?
A complete mess. He sent his men in totally unprepared. I mean, despite what General Patton thought, maybe only 10 of them could actually speak fluent American-style English.
So how were the rest supposed to manage?
They were told to just say sorry or pretend to be sick. They got caught for the tiniest things, ordering petrol instead of gas,
Right.
or driving with 4 men in a Jeep, when Americans usually only drove with 2. It's almost comical, but of course many of those men were captured and executed.
And yet, the mission became this huge, unintended psychological success.
The paranoia it created was unbelievable. His captured commandos started spreading a rumor that Skorzeny himself was on his way to Paris to assassinate General Eisenhower.
And Eisenhower's headquarters just went into total lockdown.
Complete chaos. Eisenhower basically became a prisoner in his own HQ, surrounded by barbed wire machine gun posts. They even used a body double for him.
Wow.
So the tactical mission was a failure, but the terror inspired by his name alone, that was a massive victory. Eisenhower himself put out wanted posters labeling him a spy, saboteur, murderer.
And that label followed him right to his war crimes trial at Dachau in 1947.
It did. He was charged with violating the laws of war, specifically for using those American uniforms in combat.
Which was a tricky charge because using enemy uniforms for deception was common, but fighting in them was. That was the line.
It was a very blurry line. But his defense got a huge boost from a surprise witness.
A British commando, Wing Commander Forrest Yeo Thomas.
Yes. And Yeo Thomas got up and testified that, well, everyone did it. The Allies, the Americans, the British, the French.
Yeah.
They all used German uniforms for deception. And when the prosecutor asked why, he just said to bump the other guy off.
That must have changed the whole mood in the courtroom.
It completely undercut the prosecution. It highlighted the problem of so-called victor's justice. How can you prosecute one side for something everyone was doing? So he was acquitted.
He escapes internment a year later, ends up in Franco's Spain. And this is where the post-war myth really kicks in. The whole Odessa network idea.
Right, the idea of this vast, secret Nazi escape organization, which was really cemented by movies like The Odessa File. But our sources suggest the reality was much more mundane.
Less organized.
Much less. Odessa was probably just a code word for, say, getting better privileges in POW camps, or the name for a few small, improvised escape networks. Skorzeny used them, sure, but this idea of some massive, centrally run conspiracy is unlikely.
And once he's settled, he starts to leverage that infamy. He forms the Paladin Group in the 70s.
Which was essentially a guns-for-hire outfit, an anti-communist mercenary group that trained security forces for authoritarian regimes like the Greek junta or South Africa's security service.
Some have called him the father of modern terrorism because of that.
And our sources say that's a real distortion. There are much better candidates for that title, like a former French officer named Yves Guérin-Serac, whose group was far more influential in training neo-fascist cells, especially in Italy. Skorzeny was a player, but not the kingpin.
So throughout all of this, after we've picked apart the myths, the one thing that remains is that he himself never wavered, did he? He remained a true believer in National Socialism.
Completely unrepentant.
Yeah.
He said in an interview in the 1970s that the time was not yet ripe to judge National Socialism, and that if he had to do it all over again, he'd do it exactly the same way.
He even found a more modern way to express his racial views, didn't he? He'd say there are no superior or inferior races, but then add.
But it is clear, however, that some races are without proof of culture. It's the same ideology, just repackaged.
And for someone who claimed to be tired of the fairy tales about him.
He admitted to keeping several thousand newspaper clippings about himself. He was completely obsessed with his own legend.
So when you boil it all down, what are we left with? The Commando Extraordinary was, yes, daring. But his biggest wins were either stolen from others or carefully manufactured by propaganda and his own ego.
I think the ultimate irony is this. We always say history is written by the victors. But here you have Otto Skorzeny, a soldier from a defeated army who succeeded in writing his own hugely favorable history. It's a testament, I think, not just to his bravery, but to the incredible power of propaganda and just sheer unyielding self-obsession.